Hey horror fans, Bored Now back with you for another horror movie review. Happy October once again. So today I'm going to be talking about a first time watch, and that is of the movie Drop, which is a recent Blumhouse film. It came out earlier this year. It's directed by Christopher Landon, who did the Happy Death Day films and also Freaky, the body swap movie. Written by a couple of writers who did other Blumhouse movies, including Truthful Dare and Fantasy Island. Megan Farley played Violet, who's a recently widowed woman. The film opens with her in the past with her abusive ex-husband, who we later learn took his own life. And it's sometime later, Violet is a single mother. Her son, he was very young when that happened. He's still very young, but she's finally got back into the dating game. She's going on her first date in a while. She's nervous. Her sister Jen, who babysits Toby for the night, is pushing her to get on out there again. And Violet uses a dating app. She meets this seemingly normal guy called Henry. He starts getting these weird text messages where it seems like people are pranking her, but it soon turns out that someone in the restaurant is blackmailing her to do certain things, which includes slip something into Henry's drink and to poison him. Otherwise, whoever the person is, will go after the son. And it becomes clear during the movie that they have access to the house and that they're inside the house. So they've got someone inside who can take out the son and the sister if Violet doesn't hold up her end. So as I said, it does become a whodunit, a mystery, where she's trying to figure out throughout the film who in the restaurant is sending these messages. Certain times where she thinks Henry might be the suspect as well. That's one of her early thoughts quite early on, so you get a bunch of red herrings. And yeah, that's the setup for the movie. So I will give it some credit in the premise. It definitely has quite an original premise, and it's kind of feeding off quite a modern sort of idea and some modern themes at least. And one big plus that it does have is that Megan Farley, who I'm not sure if I've seen in much before, but I do think she's very good in the movie. She's a very compelling, engrossing lead. Feels quite natural as this single woman who's really nervous about going on a first date in quite a while. She's constantly paranoid and worried about her son, and that's before she's even realised that something is up and he's in danger or could be in danger. And I think that is the strong suit of the premise, is that they do give you quite a grounded idea and something which would be quite relatable to a lot of single parents, like leaving their son, their son or their daughter, their kid, alone for the evening for the first time in a while. And that idea of you keep checking back, you're worried, you can't settle into the date. So it's actually quite a good idea for like a horror movie or a thriller, because it plays into the very real nerves of going on a first date anyway, where you're already on edge. And this is a blind date because she met Henry on this app, and the technology of the app does play a little bit into the plot and the suspense of things. So it has quite a decent and grounded premise, and it's got a good lead who I think sells the tension of the movie quite well and is quite likeable from the off. So it's then just going to be how is it going to play with things, the ideas, and where is it going to go? Is it going to offer up many surprises? And is it going to be like satisfying overall? And sadly, it's not. Like, really, I think the script does become very sort of clunky and gimmicky, and like certain aspects, certain like visual moments or big moments are just a little bit overdone. Like, and not in a very like thrilling or unsettling type way. It's a very uneven movie. Like, it can't really make up its mind quite what it wants to be, because for at least half an hour, 35 minutes, it does play it quite straight, and you get this quite slow build up and teases of certain things. But by the end, it sort of feels like it's almost like a John Wick style movie. Like, the big scenes at the end feel very like over the top and dramatic like that. You get a little bit of like Bond movie vibes, because when the villain of the movie is revealed, he starts acting very Bond movie-esque, very Bond villain-esque. Starts off as one movie, and then it becomes a more like cheesier movie, like a more over-the-top, like action-packed type movie, which I would have had no problem with if it had set itself up as that, but it kind of doesn't. Like, as I said, it does play it quite straight for quite a lot of the movie, and then it just comes out of nowhere, like these change of paces, and it suddenly tries to be a more funny movie. Like, there'd been moments where it was a little bit on the quirky, playful side, but nothing like it becomes later. And I think the other thing is, it's just not a satisfying mystery of a film. Flags up the red herrings a bit too much, like they're not subtle enough, so it almost has that problem of, if they do turn out to be the villain, then it's not going to be that satisfying because you played them up too much. But even so, it's like they're poor red herrings, because you are, like, again, playing them up too much. So it's like they don't really work either way. Like, one of the better red herrings, which they actually play quite nicely, is you've got the bartender who you see a little bit, and Violet knows her because there's a bit of a rapport and they're kind of talking. She's supporting her when she's waiting for the date. And that's another quite relatable thing, that Violet is waiting for the date and she's nervous because he's late and worried he's going to stand her up. There's a thing later on where she goes to the bar and orders a couple of shots, and the bartender, I forget her name now, but she just says at one point, "Are you sure? Like, is the date going well? Because you look a little bit on edge." And there was just something about that line, and in the context of the film and what was going on, where I thought, okay, like, is she checking up on her? And then she's questioning, are you really having a good night? And is that maybe highlighting that she could be a villain? So I think if that was meant to be a red herring, that's a good example of doing it quite well. Whereas I think the other red herrings were just too in your face. You haven't done enough with them to make them like interesting red herrings. And that's the thing, is I think the movie doesn't do enough with its plot and the mystery anyway. Like, even if it pulled out the most wildest of twists ever, which it doesn't, it just doesn't feel like a suspenseful, satisfying plot where it's like, okay, I can't wait to see where this is going. That was a great twist. They're pulling me all over with these twists and turns. It was just done in quite a clunky sort of way. So there's this waiter called Matt, who's very like quirky and OTT and very annoying. He's probably the most annoying character in the movie. And I think if you think of it almost as a Scream type setup, then I guess he might be the Stu of the movie. Now, obviously, Stu's more entertaining than this guy, but it's just that sort of character came to mind. And they do this thing about, he gives them a story about it's my first night, I'm nervous, and I'm also practicing to be like a stand-up at the Second City, and he does this whole gag about Alison Janney, which I thought was okay, you're name dropping a bit there, movie. Didn't really think that much of at the time, but I think maybe he was meant to be a red herring. And I remember thinking later on it might have been a good idea to have made him villain at least, because it's almost like if he was the villain, they sort of fooled me a little, because he was almost played as this quirky, over-the-top comic relief type character. So in some ways I didn't suspect him, so it might have been quite a good reveal if it was him, but as it was, no, he was just this very annoying character, and the gag was, then it was again almost quite awkward where he kept coming back at like inappropriate type times. But yeah, they don't really do anything with the plot and or the mystery and the potential red herrings. And I think they just get carried away with the gimmick where it just becomes quite dull after a while, because you keep getting her seeing these messages flash up and they're on the screen in like quite vivid sort of letters, and after a while that just got a bit silly, because I think the messages got quite silly and the plot was getting more and more silly, and it wasn't really that interesting to like think about or wonder about where it was going. Henry, I think he was quite well cast, because he was this very ordinary kind of bland sort of guy, but at the same time he had a little bit of a look of him where he could be a bit shifty, and they also played it early on where he seemed to have like knowledge of these digital drops and seemed to know what he was talking about. And I think they were playing it as he's being a little bit too cool and casual about all this, so could it be him? And it's quickly revealed that it can't really be him, because whoever it is trying to blackmail her into poisoning his drink. But for a while it definitely looked like it could be him. Things get really convoluted in the reveal, because it turned out to be Reed Diamond character. So Reed Diamond out of Dollhouse and a bunch of other things is in this, and I didn't really guess it was his character, because he was this character who was a little bit in and out of the movie. So he's this seemingly nice guy, Richard, who's also waiting for a blind date, and he confuses Violet for his blind date, and they have quite a nice little exchange where they toast and okay, here's to moving forward. And then Violet sees his blind date arrive, Diane her name is, and they embrace. A guy who she suspects for a long time, who's just acting all shady and seems to be like texting every time she gets a text. So it's one of those, it's very on the nose and very obvious it's not going to be him, but I should have guessed that it would be Reed Diamond, because he always plays those sorts of characters. And that's when he starts going all Bond villain and very sort of hammy, and it's slowly becoming this other kind of movie which they haven't really set up. And his explanation and the motive is just really silly and too far-fetched and cheesy, because it's this whole thing about how Henry is an FBI informant. Richard is there to take him out because he's got some dirt on Richard. So he's blackmailing Violet to poison his drink. And the idea is that he's going to make Violet look guilty, going to stitch her up for the crime, because it plays back into the stuff with her husband where she says, I didn't kill him, he killed himself. But Richard is like, well, it was only you two in the room, so there's no actual evidence for that, and people would happily believe then you did kill him even though you've been cleared. So he thinks he's got it all figured out, then he's going to pin it on on Violet. Although what's funny at that point, when he's telling Violet all this, I know you've still got the blackmail of, okay, we're going to kill your son and your sister, but she has been resistant to that for a lot of the movie anyway. And it just seems if you're telling her all this, then is that more likely to make her do it? Maybe not. And as I said, it's just convoluted and stupid, and it's this really out of left field type plan just to bump off Richard. Like, it just seems like, and he just happens to be an FBI informant. It just seems like there's a million different ways Richard could have bumped him off, which were a lot more straightforward and a bit less. And also, it's a little bit of you're taking a risk than people would be happy to pin it on to Violet. In the end, she pulls one out on Richard because she doesn't poison Henry's drink when he comes over, and instead she poisons this fancy dessert which Richard has got, and he eats it, and he's the one who gets poisoned, and he goes mad like a Bond villain, starts shooting at her. Henry dives in the way, takes the bullet. It's all very dramatic. And then it does become like a full-on action movie almost for the last few minutes, which is kind of crazy. Like, it hadn't really been that sort of movie. And you get this whole thing where she takes Henry's keys to his car because she has to rush it. She almost dies, by the way, like this really silly scene where very cartoony, like it doesn't really look that convincing, but like Richard goes flying out the window without, like, he's rocking a little bit, but it doesn't seem like there's enough momentum where the glass would actually break and he would go through. And then she gets dragged out as well and is hanging off this thing, and I can't remember if it's Henry who pulls her in or someone. I think it's someone else, but she barely survives that. And that's the thing. You start getting these over-the-top, dramatic Bond-style stunts, which it just wasn't that sort of movie before. And like I said, it just becomes too silly for what it was. And so she quickly rushes home and tries to save her son and her sister, and that's when you start getting more John Wick style scenes because her sister is like stabbing away at this crook who's in their house, and eventually she gets there, Violet, and basically saves them and sort of ends up in hospital later on with her wounds, and that's when she's reunited with Henry. And is very clean cut. It's very cut and dry. It's very sort of rom-com. It has that kind of feel, which again, okay, I don't care that much about that because it's one of those quite mainstream films, but once again it felt a little bit too fluffy for the film we'd been getting before that. So it's a little all over the place by the end. It does get very sort of clunky and, yeah, just a bit too OTT, and it feels like they had a good premise but didn't really know what to do with it. And, yeah, it's in the end it's a disappointment, and it ends up being quite dull. Like, it's not even that entertaining to watch at times. It's a hard one to rate, really, because, as I said, it did get worse as it went along. And I was a little in two minds whether it's, like, just a very mediocre movie or if it ends up being, like, really going too far the other way where it's really bad. And I think I'm going to stick in the mediocre range, because I think the lead gives it a bit of a bump. She is a good lead and is very watchable throughout. You care about her plight. Her situations, especially early on, are quite relatable. And there's one or two moments which are quite nicely done, but overall they waste a good premise and a good plot, and it's very sort of sloppy and just ends up being a little bit forgettable. So I'll go 5.5. Yeah, it's just okay in the end, which is disappointing because it had the potential to be more. So that's Drop, my thoughts on that. And I'll say it's probably the weakest Christopher Landon movie. Let me know what you guys think of it. If you've seen it, in the comments below, like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. You can also support me on patreon.com/borednow. And you can also become a channel member. If you want to help the channel out more, you can join in as a channel member. As I said, you can also make a one-off donation on PayPal, or you can donate via a super chat, or a new feature they've got now on YouTube, you can hit the hype button. It's supposed to be this new thing that helps out smaller channels, and a certain amount of points will go towards the videos, and you can hype them up a bit more and get them to more people. But thanks for listening. Let me know what you've been watching so far in October, and let me know the thoughts on the film, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.